Welcome back to Map to the Future. This is our eighth prime episode. We have a few snapshot episodes and a few live streams that we've done, but this is our eighth official episode. We are very excited to be getting this episode out there. In today's episode, we are talking with Daniel Gage. He is an entrepreneur from the United Kingdom, who is currently in the process of moving his business and setting up here in the US in the great state of Texas. He is a phenomenally interesting person, and this podcast really goes to some incredible places. He is innovating the future of farming. He is changing the way farming can work in the future. He is adjusting the way we look at farming, and he is working on ways to make food more sustainable, to securitize nations by not making them rely on food imported from other nations. He's working on a really layered and incredible amount of interesting opportunities and things within the farming sector. We get into hydroponics, we get into nutritional values, we get into the AI element, the automation element. We even talk about space and providing food in space. This episode went to some great places, and it was an absolute pleasure to record. So without further ado, welcome to Map to the Future. So first of all, Dan, thanks for joining us. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to come on and do this. So tell me a little bit about your personal background. How did you end up in the kind of the hydroponics and farming space? How did you get there?
Okay, long, slightly interesting story. So I'm 40 years old now, and I grew up in a football family. My dad was a professional footballer. So we traveled the country a lot in the UK, settled in Sheffield back in the sort of late 80s, early 90s, I believe. And when he quit the profession, when I was about 5 or 6, he did what a lot of footballers did and bought restaurants and hotels and pubs along with my mother. So they got a portfolio together. So from the age of sort of 6 or 7, I grew up in pubs, essentially in restaurants. That's all I knew. I'd come home, and instead of having nuggets and chips for dinner, I'd get shown a specials board, right? So I was around fresh fruit and veg and produce from an early age. I'd go and watch in the kitchen as the chef would, prepare my meal from school. So quite privileged, you might say. So I've been around that sector my whole life. I love it. I went on to be a chef, did a bit of work in wholesale fruit and veg as well in London, worked in the family business as well. So that whole hospitality, fruit and vegetable supply, wholesale supply chain, all that stuff is sort of been embedded in my upbringing from 6 or 7, and I love it and I'm passionate. And then back in 2019, I ended up getting fed up with the chef game and the hospitality game because it was quite hard with the hours. I had a young daughter at the time, so I pulled away, gave it some serious thought about what I wanted to do. Still wanted to stay in the hospitality, fruit and veg sector. It's my passion. It's all I've really known. And I started looking at sustainable agriculture, knowing what I know about the volatility of our supply chain. I started diving into that. And I got involved in hydroponics and aeroponics, vertical farms, all pretty, it's pretty new, that sector now anyway, but back then it was really, really new. There wasn't much going on at all, really. Certainly not, advertised as it is today. And I became an expert over the coming years on, hydroponic technology, controlled environments. And that's where I am today. And I made the decision, at that point, that's what I wanted to devote my life to, which was focusing on sustainable agriculture. I see it as a vital part of national security as well, if you want to go that heavy on it. And that's where I am today. That's where Grow More Crops is today. That's why we exist. So that's kind of the journey in a nutshell.
Fantastic. And was there a particular moment for you where as you were getting into it, you thought, yeah, this is absolutely the way I want to go, and or was it just a gradual thing?
Very interesting, because you've got two elements to this. You've got the crop section and then the
Yeah.
technology. Technology, generally speaking, is more or less, you got your hydroponics, you got your aeroponics, and there's different types of hydroponics and such like. But generally speaking, you got those two lanes. It's the crops that interested me, and that took a lot of learning, a lot of failure at the beginning too. And it was only after understanding the crops, and what I mean by that is their value and how well they grew, how easy they were to grow, and getting routes to market. That's when I thought, okay, you get these two optics right, routes to market and the crop, you've got something you can really build on there and really scale. So that was the point, really. The tech is the tech, but it was discovering the right crops and the routes to market that were the key ones for me, definitely.
So what you're saying is that tech is kind of like a platform, but you can kind of use that to grow whatever you want. Within reason, I assume, on what you can actually grow from that. And so it's really down to the understanding of the crops themselves, that allows you to make it work or not. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of, my background certainly helps, definitely. And I think identifying the value of the crops and how they grow was the key for me, absolutely. And matching them up with routes to market, having them ready to go, was the light bulb moment, because I took a lot of time, as I've said to you previously, I took a lot of time and failure in pursuing what crops had a good margin and had good demand. And once I had those two things, you're quite right, it was just an onward trajectory. And for me as well, I tend to go into this, it's very interesting, because I a lot of people in the vertical farming space who are doing it now are more scientific based or background. I'm the other end of it. I'm the end user, chef, wholesaler, back on the different end of it. I think that really puts me in a stronger position, because I'm then pushing, going, hang on, why do you say, why can't you grow that in the vertical farming? I don't accept it's limited. I just think an open mind, and you need to be prepared to just experiment and fail a little bit.
Yeah, well, that's the entrepreneurial mindset, isn't it? It's the willingness to try and to fail. You've got to have the willingness and the openness to do that, or otherwise you will just end up in a very boring lane. I think that's the way it tends to end up, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And again, with my business at Grow More, what we're doing with you, we're sitting with microgreens, but again, it's about being open-minded in the crop that you're growing. A lot of people think, microgreens will sell them to restaurants. As you know, be creative. There are other routes to market for them, and that increases value in itself. And I apply that way of thinking to other crops too. So it's not limited to just feeding or supplying restaurants and wholesalers. So it's having that mindset and that bravery, courage, you might say, to try different things. Fail sometimes, but it's worth it, as I say.
Okay, so for everybody who's listening here, who may or may not be familiar with what a hydroponic is, try as best as possible to explain what it is and what it looks like, and so on. What are they, and how do they work?
Essentially, in a nutshell, hydroponics is growing a crop of whatever kind in a soilless medium, so there's no soil involved, and in a controlled environment, so they get the exact correct dose of lighting, heat, humidity, nutrients, water. It's all precision controlled. So the crop gets the perfect environment possible, which is where you get great yields and quality and consistency. And because of these systems, you can grow them anywhere in the world. You can grow them in a warehouse in Siberia, in Australia, wherever you like. So they're great. So it's, in a nutshell, it's a soilless medium, circular unit.
Okay. And so the immediate thing that jumps into my head here is there the same level of nutritional value in those than the ones that come out of the ground that are grown in soil? And what might the differences be?
It's interesting. Funnily enough, at the moment that I saw a study not so long ago that suggested that actually nutritional content of food grown in the field in the standard way is starting to fall. That's in relation to soil quality degrading and all the rest of it. If you look at it, it depends on the crop, but if you look at microgreens, for example, they're a powerhouse of nutrients and vitamins and all the rest of it in and of themselves anyway. You can do certain things in the growing environment that can increase their nutrient density in terms of lighting and such like. So yeah, the answer to that is yes, you could. In fact, we're working with well-known universities, at the moment on biofortification. So you can absolutely get higher nutritional content in hydroponic, aeroponic grown crops. Absolutely, yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, so there's actually no downside to growing them this way, I suppose, with I suppose the one caveat to that being how many you can grow in the same area of land, because obviously some farms are 1,000 acres of farmland. They can grow obviously a lot of crops within 1,000 acres. And now, as I know, from obviously we know a little bit about this, and we've been talking about this for a while, but you can put these on top of each other, so you can rack these up pretty high. So what is the kind of yield difference there? Let's look at try to help me help me or someone else understand. If you've got a field of 100 acres and you've got a warehouse of 100,000 square feet, what's the differential kind of thing that you're talking about here? I mean, how much less or more can you grow?
Oh, by a factor of 4 or 5 easily. And don't forget, by the way, as well, you've got multiple seasons as well. You're constantly regrowing. So for microgreens, for example, if you're growing them in a field, which you wouldn't anyway, but for argument's sake, as an example, microgreens, you've got one harvest, you've got one season. Vertical farming, you're growing these things 3 times, maybe 4 times if you really push it a month. So you've got multiple harvests per month, so easily by a factor of 5 or 6. Again, depending on what crop you grow. But
because obviously some things take a lot longer to grow. But you could grow wheat in these things.
You could grow wheat. You can grow cotton, rice, everything. There's stuff that hasn't even been tried yet that I'm really keen to push. Your plantation crops, I'm really big on. I've talked about this with you before. And that ties into like helping the earth with deforestation. So things like I want to get stuck into cocoa, tea, coffee, even palm oil. That would be a real push. But like I say, I want to push the boundaries. So it hasn't even been tried yet. And it's funny. And this is what I go back to what I said earlier. So I'm at the sort of the consumer end, the chef, the wholesale supplier end of this. Whereas actually the people who are going to it at the moment tend to be at the scientific end, which is fine, by the way, not knocking it. But with that comes a bit of a clash, because with me, I want to push the boundaries and go and question it and go, well, why couldn't you try growing this or this? Whereas some of the scientific base can be quite set in their ways, not all, but some. And I suppose that's where entrepreneurism meets science for the better, and they complement each other.
I suppose finding the balance between the two. because yes, you do. I mean, from what we've talked about, I know that you're looking at sort of pushing the boundaries quite a long way, and we'll talk about that a bit more later on. But the other area that I'm interested in is sort of the reason that these aren't already all over the place. Why are these not already everywhere?
I think the first thing is that, generally speaking, the vertical farming space, and by that I encompass everything, controlled environments and such like, which is all indoor sort of stuff, like grow up farms in the UK. That, generally speaking, is relatively new. You've got what I call the sort of smart greenhouses, the hybrids, where they're basically it's half greenhouse and half hydroponics, and they work really well for certain crops, particularly microgreens. And here in the UK, you've got Westlands, they do really well. I think that controlled environment agriculture, vertical farming, is number one, it's still new, it's still emerging, great opportunity. I think two, because of that, there are still some constraints. So, for example, the 2 biggest ones, I would say, number one is definitely energy. In the UK, it's a killer. And secondary to that, it's I'm going to be a bit controversial here. I think, and this applies to the US too, I think people who are going into it at the moment on a larger scale are more ideologically driven, which is fine, but you need to have that business sense. And they don't, you know, I've said it before time and time again. If you're doing this, if you want to get into vertical farming, number one, choose the crop you're going to grow, and then find out who you're going to sell it to, and then get a damn price for it. Get that agreed, and then reverse engineer your business model. That's what we did. That's why we're looking to do very well. We've got, you know, we're scaling up. We've got buyers ready and waiting. We know what we're going to sell, how much of it, and all the rest of it. So that's, I think, really, that's probably the two biggest issues at the moment.
And in terms of energy, obviously the again, what I'm trying to do here is compare to existing farming versus this. So I'm thinking of it as like, if you're powering a warehouse full of these things, what kind of power input is required to grow the crops? Obviously, because the ones where you get one season, they're being powered by the sun effectively. There's not a lot of requirement for any other power input in there, but obviously these do require a power input. So what does that look like? How much power are these things actually using?
A lot. It couldn't be specific because we'd have to go into the details of what you're growing, which matters, and the size. But in terms of percentage of what you're spending on daily operations, it's like 70, 80, 90%. You know what I mean? It's huge. It's absolutely huge.
It's all so 70, 80, 90% is all energy costs.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Which is why the greenhouse element works pretty well. Although I would argue they do have issues as well, because the greenhouse structure is a lot. They don't make use of the vertical space, and of course you get overheating in the summer and you get cooling in the winter, so you have to balance that out. So the key really is sustainability, is renewables on them. That's how you solve it. But there's no way. So we're starting up at the moment. We at Growmore, we've been doing R&D for about 18 months, really understanding it, got our routes to market. We know at the moment that we can actually operate with the buyers that we've got and the output we've got by taking money from energy from the grid, no problem. But when we start to scale, you know, in 3 or 4 months down the line, renewables will become a necessity, because at that point you're looking at bills of 20 grand a month. And at that point you can't ignore that. And renewables are there, by the way. They're out there, they're available. And all the big boys who do controlled environment agriculture in the UK already, they have a renewable supply, which is great. They just happen to grow the wrong crops, in my opinion.
That makes sense. So I suppose then what we're saying here is that this isn't going to end up being the be all and end all. This isn't going to end up being the thing that replaces farming entirely. You're not going to replace all farming around the world with this kind of thing because of the energy requirement that goes in there. So this is more likely to be focused in specific areas. It's going to be more likely. Is that what you're saying, or is that accurate, or am I way off?
Well, I don't know. At the moment, as it stands, I think yes, you're right, correct. I think controlled environment agriculture is a supplement, is a complement to what we call traditional farming. That's where we are at the moment. Will be for the next sort of 5-10 years. I think as technology gets better and as we progress, I think it's only a matter of time before renewables become so cheap and affordable. When that happens, I think controlled environment agriculture will dominate, because it's the biggest constraint. If you can solve that issue, which we're already looking into at Growmore, you open the doors to every other crop. I mean, I talked earlier about plantation crops. Save a few that are expensive because of harvesting, which is only a handful. The rest energy intensive because they are traditionally grown in tropical regions, you know, in or whatever. That means more heating, it means more lighting, that equates to more energy. I think technology is changing, and when it does, and you have those renewables that are efficient, I do think it will begin to dominate, but I think it will take time.
So effectively what you're saying is that is that this could eventually become the way that we farm, rather than take large parts of land and large pieces of land and farm on large areas of land. If we're able to solve the energy requirement problem.
Absolutely. There'll be a lot of people who disagree with me. I think they're wrong, and I think I'm right. I think also, by the way, it will become a necessity.
Yeah.
Now, we can all debate about why the climate is changing. We all have opinions on that. I think we all can agree that the climate is changing a little bit. You know, I don't really recognize the 4 seasons anymore. It seems to be just 2. Pollution is a big issue. Soil quality and health is a big issue. These things are getting worse. I think if you want to go delve into politics just quickly, you know, we've seen recently in Iran and all the rest of it. I don't think countries anymore can be reliable on external sources of certain, resources into the country, whether that's water, pharmaceuticals, or in this case, food. I think we have become sustainable. So I think it's a necessity, actually. And just in conjunction with that quickly, I think we're now seeing the merging of 2 major titan sectors of pharmaceuticals and health and food. I think they are gradually becoming one. And what I mean by that is quickly here in the UK now, it's becoming almost cool and trendy to eat healthy, to be healthy. You know, 20 years ago when we were in our 20s, it was cool to get a McDonald's. Do you know what I mean? Whereas now, actually, it's cool to go and get like one of these ready to go meals. Now they're really big. Fried is a big one. They really focus on health. Placing a premium and saying, look, you're buying this product. You know, it's a little bit more expensive, but you're paying for health as well. I like that, and I think that's where health and food are merging. So I think for all those reasons, it's becoming a necessity.
I agree, and I think that you know, to your point regarding the climate, I mean, the climate always changes, and one of the things that you know, doesn't matter what we do or not. You know, well before people were around, we had ice ages and massive spikes and everything else. So it makes whatever your opinion might be around that, the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter what we do, the climate's still going to change. So so therefore, what this effectively allows us to do is to insulate food supply against it.
Absolutely, completely. Absolutely. Regardless of season, regardless of political turmoil, external circumstances, market volatility, it shields it completely. And by the way, over the long term as well, once businesses in this sector are established, it paves the way for truly affordable, lower cost food as well, and higher nutrition food, which I think everyone wants. So absolutely a necessity.
So one of the areas we've talked about before as well is including things like aquaponics within something like this. Is like indoor fish farming kind of thing in these sort of things. So and I suppose that also does that also include sort of water crops and vegetables and things like that as well? Does it also cover that or not?
Yeah, I think so. Slightly outside my realms of understanding, but I know a little bit about it. So yeah, it's the idea for those of you who are watching it. It's the circular environmental control system. So you've got your crops growing. The water that they're using is also used to house fish. Use the fertilizer from fish to fuel the crops, and so the circle goes round and round.
Interesting.
Yeah, you can carry on. Yeah, as my understanding goes in this particular sector, you can pretty much grow anything. I think it's more of the infrastructure of that and how that would work would be quite challenging, but not insurmountable. Quite costly. But again, in the longer run, certainly I see that. I see that being a natural evolution of controlled environment agriculture in 20-30 years, that these things come together, they merge together, and you have these hubs in cities across the world that, like in my city here in Sheffield or in your state in Texas, you've got a control, environment, agriculture, farm that encompasses everything, agriculture, crops, the lot.
Does that include animals for meat production as well? because obviously the one area that this doesn't really touch on at all is arable farming. And the requirements in that, because we, it was trendy for a long time to consider meat unhealthy, but I think a lot of everything is everyone's quickly cottoned on to the fact that that's completely untrue, and that actually meat is probably the healthiest thing you can be eating. And
Absolutely.
what I want to make sure people understand from what we're talking about here is this isn't some vegan crusade to make everyone vegetarian. This is about trying to just make a sustainable agricultural environment. So where does arable farming fit into that?
I think it fits in where we vertical farmers actually delve into the realms of animal feed. So I see like a vertical farm, maybe with an aquaculture incorporated, and somehow we have cattle in there. Like from a contamination point of view, I think that would be really difficult. I don't rule anything out. I think at the moment, to answer your question as it stands, I think the way that the two can be related is where we can actually, grow and bring in a new generation of sustainable, super nutritious, organic feed for cattle that is more environmentally friendly, has more benefits to the cattle, is more affordable, by the way, to farmers as well. That's how I see it at the moment. To answer your question.
And I suppose if you're eliminating a lot of the need for large scale monocrop farming outdoors, you're effectively giving the opportunity to create a lot more pasture.
Rewilding, I think they call it over here in the UK. Exactly that. It frees that land up. Correct. Interesting.
That's because I think one of the biggest criticisms that I've heard around this is the whole idea that, if you just grow monocrops in gravy fields, then you're not killing anything. You don't have to kill any animals to eat, whereas that's completely untrue. In fact, you're killing absolutely everything else that lives in that environment in order to grow that crop.
Everything. Butterflies, insects, voles, moles, field mice, the lot.
Everything.
Absolutely.
Everything else in that whole area has to die in order to sustain that monocrop. And also, I think I saw something recently where they were talking about that in nature you don't get monocrop. If you look anywhere in nature, you don't get one single plant dominating an entire area. One whole area. You do get it where there's one plant that is the most common one in an area. But it's always interspersed with others.
And that's how it works. It's the natural world. It's biodiversity. That's what that is. And I suppose one of the advantages that I'm immediately picking up on with regard to this vertical farming and the the hydroponics or whatever we want to call it is that you don't have to spray everything with pesticides. Correct. Nothing at all. Completely controlled, sealed off from the outside world. Which I know it sounds alien, but actually you're not putting anything abnormal into those crops. There's no fertilizers, no chemicals, pesticides. It's completely sealed off. Which can only be. And don't forget, the knock-on effects of doing that in a field are immense, because it's not just the crop that it affects that the farmer's spraying. That goes into the soil. It then comes in as runoff into local waterways, affects fish into the ocean, has a real knock-on effect. What I always say about climate change is it needs a rebrand. It should be something that, it should be focused more on pollution. That's the thing. That's the killer. That's what we should be focusing on. And that's my big thing. That's my big sort of beef with people who go on about climate change. Focus on pollution. That's and this is a classic example. Fertilizer. Terrible.
Well, I mean, it's I think I read something quite recently, and I've looked into this quite a lot, but a lot of the people who would have problems with eating wheat products. So a lot of people have a problem with breads and pastas and things like that. And for a long time, it was considered that it was the gluten that was the problem. That's the thing that's in there. However, neuro research and stuff is coming out at the moment and showing that actually it's predominantly not a gluten problem. What happens is actually the fact that glyphosate is sprayed onto a lot of these crops. That goes into the food, and that creates an immune response within your body that is exacerbated by gluten.
Amazing.
So basically, when it's not actually really the gluten problem. It's all of the poison that's sprayed onto the crops to stop things from eating them that gets into the food supply, because that doesn't go away. You spray glyphosate over crops, it's still in the bread by the time you eat it.
Yeah, wow. I can believe it.
Yeah, and so I think that something like this sounds absolutely ideal in the fact you don't need to do any of that.
Yeah. And also, by the way, it paves the way to go back to, I think you mentioned there about ancient grains and all the rest of it. It paves the way to reintroduce and grow, or try and grow, old ancient grains of wheat and all the rest of it as well, if you wanted to, that perhaps you couldn't now because of the environment or whatever. So it is another reason to look at controlled environment agriculture.
Well, you touched on the soil problem, and one of the things that's attributed to is the wide scale use of pesticides, that they go into the soil and they kill off a lot of the microbiome in the soil, and that prevents the soil from being able to provide the same nutrient level to a crop.
Catastrophic. Yeah, exactly, which is why a lot of our veg now isn't nearly as nutritious as it was 50 years ago. And that should be, again, going back to what I talked about earlier about the merging of the food sector and the health sector. One of my big missions is to really make people understand that food is medicine, essentially. Now, I'm not going to preach here. I eat junk food sometimes. I'm not.
Everybody does. Everyone does. There's nothing wrong with eating some junk food every now and then.
No, absolutely. But what I want to try and draw attention to as well is, and I talked to my wife about this, is to try and, it's so hard to go completely sort of organic, shall we say, where you don't touch anything that's been processed, because virtually every single thing has been. Even if you buy your standard carrots and celery, if you trace it back further along, it's probably been sprayed with something. But everything, bread, cereal, don't get me started on sort of the old style microwave dinners that have been around for 10, 15 years. We're almost hooked to this stuff, and it's bad for our bodies. It really is. And I read somewhere the other day that bowel cancer rates are increasing in under 30s at alarming rates. There's a reason for that. So food is medicine. That's a big thing of mine that I'm trying to push in this.
100%. I'm glad that you said that, actually, because I was kind of working towards that in my own head. I think you touched on a very important point there as well, in like food and the merging of the food and the health sectors, because I have said for a long time that the biggest problem with the health sector is, and especially in the medical sector, is that I have yet to speak to a doctor. I have yet to ever see a doctor. Now, I almost never see a doctor, but I have yet to ever encounter one that if you tell them about something that ails you, they ask you anything about your diet, because most of them don't understand.
Really.
They don't understand nutrition at all. They're not really trained on nutrition. They're not really taught to understand it. What they're taught to understand is how to peddle their legal drugs. That's really what they're effectively trained on. And so most of the time the solution is take another drug. Whereas, and mask it and not really fix the problem, because if you cure someone, guess what? You haven't got a customer anymore. So the whole shift towards this healthier living is, I think, was really accelerated by all of the nonsense that went on during COVID, and all of the governmental lies that came down about that, and all of the desperate attempt to push you to take an experimental drug and all this kind of stuff. I think that really woke a lot of people up from saying, well, hang on, why, what is this? What am I looking at here? Why am I being told this? Why am I being told that? And that has opened up all sorts of things. Like, the food pyramid was a complete fabrication, wasn't healthy. The food pyramid was pushed by large food interests, by large companies that own large amounts of food, to try to convince people to eat more of the cheap stuff they could produce cheaply, and less of the more expensive stuff that costs more to produce. None of it was close to being advisable at all. And the new one that the Trump administration's brought out, the one that RFK was in charge of putting together, that one is far better, and it's far more focused on meats and whole foods and all this kind of thing. And I think that something like this that can lead you into ways of being able to do things that outperform the bad stuff. I think is the key. The one thing that I think it sounds like it's still a problem to be solved in some way, shape, or form, is obviously the energy requirement. Because energy is such the requirement for energy in general is exponentially growing. As we become more advanced to civilization, the need for energy just keeps on growing and growing. And at the moment, the problem we have is that we can't produce enough energy to keep up with our own innovation.
No,
we can't actually produce enough energy to advance as quick as we would want to. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and mostly down to idiots who think nuclear energy is a bad idea, but think that it might be a good idea to cover hundreds of thousands of acres with solar panels instead. It's that kind of thing that's the real problem, in that it's mostly just bad policies that get in the way of that kind of thing. But the energy, I think, is the one area of this that's catching up with itself.
And like you say, this is why I'm convinced that somewhere down the line, bit later on down the line, that controlled environment agriculture will ultimately dominate, because we'll solve the energy problem. And once you do, everything to grow is on the table at no cost, because you've got renewables on it. I'm confident that the way the technology is going now, the way that we are advancing as a species, that will be solved within the next 4 or 5 years.
So the solution's there. I mean, nuclear is the solution, and
absolutely, I agree.
And we ourselves, from an investment perspective, are looking at quite a few companies in that space as well. And I think the SMRs are going to be a big thing, which are the small modular reactors. Rather than you having to build out massive, great big power stations, you can put an SMR in a localized location, and it provides the power to a local location completely.
Why wouldn't you do that?
Why wouldn't you do that? Exactly. And there's even now big advancements happening in fusion. They're starting to be able to commercialize fusion, and fusion has got orders of magnitude more power production than fission does. So it's that problem will be solved, and it'll be solved by necessity. Mostly it'll be the need to power AI, I think, that is going to be the thing that actually pushes it mostly. But its additional effects are that it provides more power and energy to other things like this, for example.
Absolutely, and I find it incredibly exciting. That, coupled with the fact that vertical farming is still, in my opinion, in its infancy, so there's loads of potential there. I find it, I absolutely love it. And what I really love is that I'm at the forefront. I've discussed this with you previously, of an industry that actually has the potential to really, really improve, health of communities, global health, and offer, nutritious fruits and vegetables and crops at affordable prices for people. And the other markets as well that we've talked about that you can get involved in. That's probably another podcast for another time.
Maybe, but no, that's great. Okay, so tell, what does the inside of one of these? What's it going to look like inside it? And not just now. What I'm talking about here is the future of this, because we've talked about some of the things you want to do. You want to automation, machines, that kind of thing. So what would it actually look like if someone was to walk inside one of these in 2 years time, 3 years time? What's the dream about what one of these looks like inside?
Just stay sat down, because we're about to enter the realms of Star Trek here, but this is legit. So if you're going to walk in one of my farms in 3 or 4 years time, you'd walk through the roller shutter doors, and you'd be met with an array of LED lighting, state-of-the-art humidifiers and temperature controls, green vegetation everywhere, stacked up to the rafts, and you'd probably have AI robots and flying drones dotted around, working all over the place, harvesting, seeding, tending to germination, packaging, all that kind of thing. So completely sort of sci-fi stuff, but
completely autonomized.
Completely autonomized, absolutely. Precision agriculture. Yeah, humans will have a role to play, but overwhelmingly 80%, AI, completely AI control, absolutely. Precision. It has to be. It can't not be. And a quick example is we're working really diligently with a company on harvesting saffron. The reason saffron's so expensive is because you've got to have people on their hands and knees plucking these tiny little threads out over hundreds of acres. You solve that with AI, well, the most expensive crop in the world overnight becomes affordable. Well, I'm sorry, that's one of the reasons I'm in this game.
You'll upset some saffron farmers, but yes, but what you're doing again is you're making it possible for people to access things that they can't currently access, for example. And
and by the way, over there in America, just quickly, so if you look at saffron, it has some medicinal uses as well. Obviously in America, you have the issue where you pay for your health insurance and all the rest of it. Fine, not getting involved in that. But if you can then cut the cost of saffron by 90% because of how because of AI and how you harvest it and grow it, well, then that knock-on effect down the line makes something that's medicinal more affordable. And you apply that to all other medicines that evolve crops to be produced. It's not just food. So, and that's what really gets me going. That's what I love.
So this can produce things like supplements. It can produce things like literal medicine foods as well, because they use a lot of things like mushrooms and things like that in medicine production. I suppose those are already kind of mostly grown inside as well. But I suppose if you are able to use this technology to grow them faster and get higher yields and so on.
And more nutrient dense and with higher compounds on particular enzyme or whatever that is used for such a medicine. Absolutely. So you're not just talking food here. You're talking pharmaceuticals. You're talking chemicals. You're talking the whole thing. It's absolutely. Even like you could go down the road of fertilizers, things like that if you wanted to.
So you can produce organic fertilizers that don't harm the earth and everything else that goes into I mean, it's and it makes a huge amount of sense to me. So one of the things that we've touched on, and one of the things that you've talked about before that really made me get excited when you mentioned it was some of the research and stuff that you're looking at doing here, which is going to be looking at things like, for example, making seed germination happen faster. Tell me more about that. Tell me what your thinking is there and what you're looking at and how that might even work.
So, being rather crass, the first instance that drives me is the business sense. Like if let's just use microgreens because that's what we're starting with in my company, right? You take microgreens, generally speaking, the bulk of the growing cycle is germination, and the last 2-3 days is lighting and growing. If you could reduce that to just 1 day or 2 day, you then jump from having 3 harvests a month to 5 or 6. Well, the economics speak for themselves. But then you could apply that to other crops that take months to germinate. Well, if you could reduce that down to a week or 2 week or even a month, you make these plants vastly more economically viable to grow commercially, which is only a winner in my view. And it has multiple benefits, not just economically, but on a social humanitarian level too, because you could offer these seeds to places in Africa, for example. So to me, seed germination is a big one. I'm big on that. And nutrient density, they're my 2 big ones.
Absolutely. And you can do those things without getting into GMO and chemical processes and things like that. This can be done free of that kind of thing.
We think so. We certainly want to. That's certainly the way we want to go. If you had to do genetically modified and all the rest of it, I wouldn't really want to touch it. I don't want to go down that line.
No.
I rule nothing out, and I've been trialing now for 18 months on various different crops, like this micros, a bit of tea, coffee on a smaller scale, peppercorns, And the results we've had, if you looked online, it would take such and such time to produce this.
Yeah.
Really, because we've sort of nearly halved that.
Yeah.
And that's not in an overly scientifically controlled environment. That's just in my farm in Sheffield.
Yeah, that's
but when you put money
just
behind it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So what you're saying is that with just some basic techniques, you've already been able to potentially half the crop time of some of these things, and that's so if you're able to do this in an even more focused way and do a lot more with it and spend a lot more time on it and more resources on it and so on, you can conceivably get that down to even lower. And as you say, you can potentially double, triple the yields per year as a result, because you can germinate everything faster. That makes a massive difference, doesn't it?
And for me, what's key is, I always say, I'm the owner of my company, I'm the leader of it, but I want to surround myself with people who are smarter than me. And so that's why I'm trying to team up. I'm teaming up at the moment with King's College London, as you know. And so I've played around with this myself. The next stage is to actually team up now with institutions, the scientists. I talk about you got your scientists and you got me at the other end. It's bringing us together and moving forward. And I love that, because these people are passionate just like me, and that's the key to it now. As the next step is working with really talented people to push that forward in a more controlled setting, really nail it down, and there we are. We scale it up.
Definitely. I think that when you start looking at what this can do, the possibilities are kind of endless, aren't they? You can build these inside towns, and you can have them feeding. You can have them providing the food in a city, in a town. You could have them in the middle of, as you say, out in the middle of the desert. Serving remote communities. You can put them almost anywhere.
Absolutely.
In order to grow the food, and as you say, you are able to grow. Because of the controlled environment, I suppose technically you can grow anything anywhere. You could grow oranges in Alaska, for example. You could do things like that, which is incredible when you start actually looking at what that can do for the world.
Absolutely. And number one, you hear this from a lot of politicians, that the world is becoming closer, more interconnected. I actually disagree. I think that's the illusion of tech. We are in a phase of whether it's right or wrong, or you agree with it or not, where it's kind of like every country for itself at the moment, and that's only going to intensify as resources dwindle. Again, doesn't matter what your politics is. That's just the way we're sort of going. It stands to reason that you become self-sufficient in at least your food and other areas.
Yes.
Personally. The second thing about controlled agricultural environments is that because it's all controlled, you are guaranteeing yields, quality, and volume, which is something like wholesale buyers, for example, love. It's not like we're planting out in the field. If you get a bad season, well, half the crop lost, or you've got pest control issues. Oh, I'm sorry. Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
Controlled environments, you've not got that. You are completely shielded from that as well.
Yeah.
And again, with the climate changing, hugely important.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes massive differences, doesn't it? I think I think that where the other thing that jumps to mind here, and I believe this is something we've touched on previously as well, is that one of the areas that is really interesting at the moment is the moving into space and the establishment of things like a moon base and the intention of setting up a Mars and things like that. Those things will probably happen in our lifetime, and this kind of technology makes it more viable, because I was talking to someone about this fairly recently, about the difference between the old world colonization of different places versus now. So when Columbus set sail from Spain, for example, over to America. Okay, he didn't know if he was definitely going to get there, but the fact of the matter is, when they got there, everything they needed was still there. So when they got there were still trees, there were still crops, there were still animals, there was still wildlife, there was stuff that they could use there to feed themselves.
Yeah.
Whereas you go to the moon, there's none of that. You have to take everything with you. And the same thing when you go to Mars and so on. You have to take all of these things with you. You can't you can't rely on when you get there, you're going to be able to sustain yourself with what's there. You're going to have to be able to sustain yourself with the stuff you take with you. And so this kind of technology fills a critical gap there, doesn't it?
Yeah, and plays a critical role, as you just so aptly identified. I think, to be fair, actually, if you look at NASA, they already probably deploy this kind of kit on whatever scale on the is it International Space Station? I'd imagine they've probably got something up there already anyway.
I mean, not as far as I'm aware, but they might. But I certainly haven't seen anything with regard to it. But I know one company we're talking to at the moment who are working in the space sector. They're building a lot of the technology for the planned space station on the moon. That they're intending to establish it by 2030.
Wow.
So there's and that's a US government mandate to do that. So the intention is that they're gonna have some sort of permanent base on the moon by 2030. So there will obviously be some necessity of something like this. That can be there. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And if I'm, to sound slightly incredible, I guess you might say at the moment. I see my farms ultimately the ultimate evolution at some point down the road, looking to occupy that space as well. It's certainly not on the forefront of my mind at the moment, but I think there are two types of thinkers: those who understand where the world is going, and actually the only thing that's stopping us is our imagination. And those think, that's just nonsense, not going to happen. I think we're on the cusp of a complete. I don't think people quite realize the change that is going to occur in the next 10 years. It's going to be unlike anything we've seen in the last 50 years. I think data centers, I think it's inevitable. Data centers, you look at the energy consumption, how they need cooling, it makes perfect sense they go into space. And I think once that happens, that's the foundation. There'll be the building blocks for other sectors to piggyback on top of. And I think that'll happen quite quickly, as you say.
Absolutely. And actually it was you mentioned the data centers and the space thing. It was occurring to me earlier when you were talking about the energy requirements and the AI and so on that'll be running these farms. These can almost work as a kind of symbiotic relationship with data centers.
Correct.
You could basically put them in the same places as data centers are. The data center energy that's being used can also power the farm. The AI can do it. The heat that comes off the data center can help heat it, and the AI that's running in the data center can power the AI in the farm, for example. So there's a huge amount of what seems like a symbiotic thing there, and in some ways, doesn't that make a data center a lot more palatable to a community? That what we're doing here is we're building the data center, but we're building one of these farms there as well, and we're producing all of this stuff, and we're doing all of these things with it.
It's interesting. It's like over here in the UK we've got net zero, which I think is a complete waste of time. But they're better off spending that money on the model that you've just outlined, and I see that as the future. I see that kind of model in all major cities across the world. It's like a combination of data centers and AI, vertical farming, pharmaceuticals, that they all complement each other in one way or another. And I think ultimately you'll see, I talked about the food and pharma and health merging. I think if you look at it as a sector, vertical farming, that will eventually also merge with like data centers and other sectors and go, well, let's pull together. You're going to have that 100 acres there for your data center. Well, I'll tell you what, we'll have 50 acres here on the outskirts of that next to you for our vertical farm. That's how I think it will go. And I think you'll have one of these sort of models, this sort of business model in each major city. Farm, data center, and whatever else it might be, critical infrastructure.
Absolutely. That makes
approach, that modular approach.
Definitely, which brings me to another interesting point that I've been thinking about recently as well, which is I've seen quite a few companies now who are building out what they're calling like distributed data centers. So
Right.
rather than it being a great big giant data center, what they're doing is they're installing these kind of small ones about roughly the size of like a sort of half height fridge, for example,
Okay. Interesting.
in individual houses. So basically, you have one of these, and it goes. They put it on the outside of the house, but it heats water in your house, for example. But it also,
okay.
but it also runs as a mini data center. But it's like a distributed data center. They put 1,000 of these into 1,000 homes, and they've got 1,000 nodes of a data center. So is there in your mind, does the economy of scale of what you're doing suffer if you did a similar thing with this and grew these in miniatures somewhere?
It depends. I think there's a lot of R&D and work to be done to make it efficient. I suppose it depends on the crops. I wouldn't want to go down that road and invest money in it if you used to go lettuce. Sorry, I've got no interest in lettuce. It's dull, it's boring. I don't care what people say.
And
I've got no interest in introducing that.
It's got basically no nutrition in it anyway.
No. If the tech evolved enough and we got it efficient enough, which I hope to do over the sort of coming years, where you could have like a unit the size of your wardrobe, right? And it could grow carrots and some celery.
Especially if you were able to grow it at an accelerated rate, as you're talking about. So effectively, what you'd have is kind of your own fresh vegetable unit within your house,
your own garden in a contained unit. So they already exist, but they exist for lettuce and herbs. And I always say this when people go on a crusade about we've got a vertical farm and we're going to supply several thousand tons of fresh lettuce. It's not going to save the world, pal, and it's not going to solve the food crisis. And
it's not. No, because people can't live on lettuce.
No, when we crack that for your carrots and your blueberries and stuff, absolutely, away you go, and that is something I'm interested in. At the moment, it's not quite there. I think it will be. I think something Grow More looking to do, and we're sort of working on that in house at the moment. That's probably 5 or 6 years away, but I would. As I say, as I opened my this podcast, it's all about the crop. If you get the right crop and it's worthwhile doing it, you can go into one of these cabinet units. You go, right, you've got your fresh carrots, your blueberries, and I don't know, your Brussels sprouts that are being grown for you. That's worthwhile. There's nutritional value, there's taste, there's flavor. It's great. Not as lettuce. So I think in time, absolutely.
No, I agree. I think
or even as quickly like vending machines. I don't rule that out. So you've got like this is again something we're looking at is replacing vending machines with the crap that's in them, like sweets and crisps, but actually you've got fresh produce growing in them, like carrots or whatever.
That can be
again, a bit further down the line, but that's where our eye is on.
Definitely, no, I like that idea, and one of the things that we've talked about before, which I want to come to now, is what you can do with these kind of microgreens, and things that you're growing, because as we've talked about before, they're very, they're high yield as far as a crop goes. You can get 2-3 crops a month. You can get possibly more than that, and they come off. You get very large amounts of them, especially if you've got a large space. You can get a lot of them off. But they're very, as you say, nutrient dense. They're very high in things like iron. They're very high in things like naturally and so on. They're very good for that. So you can use them to create supplements, can't you?
Yeah. So we're working with a university to biofortification. You're increasing that nutrient density further. All naturally, no nasty chemicals, anything like that. It's by how you grow them. And the idea is then we take them, we harvest them, freeze dry them, keep all that nutritional content in, blitz them, and then we put them in a tablet form, or even in a powder form in a sachet or whatever. That we're looking very seriously at that, because again, it's going back to what I said earlier about the McDonald's effect. People now, it's cool to eat healthily, and I think that you look at a lot of our foods now, most of them have got, you look at the ingredients list, there's 50 ingredients. The same is true, generally speaking, when you look at nutrients, when you look at vitamins. They've got 9 different things. There's a real desire to have that ingredients list shrunk down,
Yeah.
and have the bare minimum, but know what you're getting is good.
Yeah.
It's not processed and ultra processed. It's just natural. And there's such a big market for that. So that's where the microgreens for us are really interesting.
Yeah. You touched on a very interesting point just there that immediately set a little light off in my head, which was talking about the McDonald's effect and the junk food thing. Now, I think one of the factors in that is that junk food is quick to produce.
Yeah.
Healthy food takes a while.
So
what you're doing here is potentially making the production of it faster.
Yeah.
You're bringing the production of healthy food to a similar speed as junk food, and that shifts the argument quite substantially.
Yeah, you could call it McFarming.
Exactly.
That's quite good actually. Yeah, McFarming. It's basically we're the McDonald's of the fresh fruit veg sector.
Yeah,
a lot of work to do, but that's basically where I want us to be. Absolutely. And again, at the moment, it is, you look at this quick side note is you look at the cost of our fruit and veg in the aisles in this country. Bizarrely, it's going to be really controversial. It's way too cheap for the energy and time and effort a farmer has to slug his guts out to produce it. And people don't realize that. And I only mention that because that's going to become unsustainable at some point as well.
Yes, it will. Yeah. I mean, if you look at farms, they're all on subsidies and things like that because the government has to subsidize them. They can't survive without it. I mean, if you watch the Clarkson's Farm series, the new one's just come out. I was watching a bit of that the other day, and you see how little they are getting for all of the work that goes into it. It's and it's almost like you wonder why they bother. And so what's going to happen at some point is they're going to stop bothering. That is the problem,
I think as the older generation die out, to be crass, the younger generations are going to go, what's the point? And it's going back to McFarming. We can produce at scale. So in
solve the problem.
In one acre of farm. Be very vague here because I'm not going into crop specifics, but in 1 acre of farm, a vertical farm could produce 10 acres worth of a crop. And if you do that with solving the energy issue as well, when you look at it like that, and if you were to solve germination rates as well and get those down, it's a no-brainer.
And I think the one thing that makes this work as well is if we're able to set it up in a way that means you get it as it produces, so it has its own energy source. It's not reliant on the grid. It's got its own decentralized energy that's actually in there. I lost the word for a second, but I came back to it. Decentralizing it so that those things operate and function outside of the grid.
Completely sustainable. Yeah, absolutely.
Completely self-sustainable, especially if you're doing the whole thing which we were talking about with the circular thing, with the fish and the fertilizer and all the other things that you can do with it to create this very circular self-sustaining farm. You make a huge impact there. And if you look at the amount of money that these farms spend on fertilizers, spend on pesticides, spend on all this, and you're able to cut all of that out. You're able to cut every single one of those things out. None of that is needed at all. You can do it this way, and this is it. The only on that from tilting that way is the energy requirement. And it's just about finding the ways to creatively solve that problem. And we will.
Absolutely. And don't forget the other important part here, and this is really important, is the market. And I go back to this point, is that there is a desire now, I think both in the US actually, but also certainly in the UK, for clean, healthy eating. And I say it again, because it's so important, the food and the health pharma industry is merging. People are starting to see that food is medicine, it's health. And again, to all of you watching, I'm not finger wagging. I like them at crispy, but we all know that what we put in affects our health longevity and all the rest of it. And crucially, you know, people of all ages, not just younger generations now, but even generations older than me and you, Alex, are starting to understand. If you buy something and it's got 50 ingredients and it's got a shelf life of 2 months, there's something not quite right with that, and it's not meant to go.
Yes, exactly.
I think the market is a big one as well. Definitely.
100%. The market is ready for it.
Absolutely, they want it. And again, one of the things we're going to look at doing when we scale up later this month, early in July, is, you know, when we were kids, you could go to farms, you could do pick your own. One of the things we want to work with is local schools, is you know, open days, come in, pick your own strawberries at our farm, pick your own herbs, educate the kids a little bit. So yeah, market's ready for it. It's perfect timing, and because we're at in the early days of this, I find that really exciting, because the world's an oyster. It's great.
Fantastic. Well, that is a perfect point at which to bring it to a close, Dan. Thank you so much for joining us, and that's been a great episode. I think we could probably talk for another hour if we
really good. I'm pretty chuffed. I feel like I've got a really good logo there, Muck Farming.
Yeah, I like that.